Okay, the next case I'm going to be looking at is McDonald versus the City of Chicago. This one was in 2010. In this case, the City of Chicago, more specifically a village of Oak Parks, had laws that made it almost impossible for ordinary citizens to own a firearm. Uh, this ultimately led to some petitioners of the Heller cases stating, hey, this is illegal, and this is violating the 14th and Second Amendment. Not to mention that these laws made it extremely susceptible to crime. That was kind of their other argument, like, hey, you can't do this. You're making it really easy for the criminals to get guns, but not really easy for the criminals to get guns, because law-abiding citizens are going to break laws while the burglars are breaking laws. So that's kind of what they're saying. While the village argued that they can do this and it was protected under the Seventh Amendment. Then they proceeded to cite three historical Second Amendment cases: United States versus Cruikshank. That one's hard to pronounce. Presserville v. Illinois, Miller versus Texas, which were decided in the wake of the court's interpretation of the 14th Amendment privileges or immunity clause in the slaughterhouse cases way back in the day. So these were old things that were saying, hey, this is why we can do it, And the petitioners are like, no, you said we can't do it. Okay. The petitioners based their case on two submissions. Primarily, they argue that the right to keep and bear arms is protected by the privileges or immunity clause of the 14th Amendment, and that the slaughterhouse cases' narrow interpretation of the clause should now be rejected. So they're saying, hey, these historical things, it's wrong. This narrow interpretation is infringing upon other things. It's not good. As a secondary argument, they contend that the 14th Amendment's due process clause incorporates the Second Amendment's right to bear arms. Chicago and Oak Park, the respondents, maintain that the right set out in the Bill of Rights applies to the states only when it is an indispensable attribute of any civilized legal system. If it is possible to imagine a civilized country that does not recognize the right, municipal respondents assert that right is not protected by due process. So a bunch of legal jargon I don't really understand. Okay, however, the outcome of this court case, I know you're on the edge of the seat. They reconfirmed what Heller said 2 years prior, in 2008. The decision to right to bear arms, just like they had 2 years earlier. Then they go in and argue each of the decisions that these court cases have made in the 19th century. The other court cases that I mentioned in the wake of the slaughterhouse thing. Excuse me. They ultimately, due to the Heller decision, they ultimately overturned some of these examples. For instance, when the court was trying to decide the 14th Amendment and the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms is applicable to the nation's history. AKA, they were trying to see if the 14th and the Second Amendment were used throughout history. Also, were Americans using handguns to protect themselves? Which, yeah, they were pretty easily able to find that out because, well, who could have guessed America loved their guns? Americans love their guns. Man, what is happening? In order to determine this, they looked at the Heller case. Actually, they used that to prove that guns were historically used for self-defense. Okay, that was the outcome of that case, which I'm getting a headache. Final case I have is New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Barone. In this case, New York passed a law in 2022 that you needed a permit for owning a gun, which in and of itself isn't that big of a deal. However, when it came time to get the permit, you had to, like before, talk to the police in order to obtain a permit. And the only way that you would get a permit from the police would be if you had a overwhelming reason to own a concealed carry or a registered firearm. And what I mean by this is you couldn't just go in and be like, yeah, I want a gun to protect myself. You had to be like, oh, I want a gun because they're trying to kill me. So that was pretty much the only way that you could get a gun. However, this is unconstitutional and led to New York being taken to the Supreme Court, which where they defined who could own a gun. For example, they decided a felon can't own a gun. You can't own a gun if you're not mentally sound, but you could own a gun if you weren't under like certain categories, which was great. It gave the police a baseline for what they could and couldn't turn people away from owning a gun. Yeah, they just turned. Because imagine if it was like discriminations against blacks, that would be hilarious. But it would be hilarious. No, take that back. It would be a big problem. This again, by passing those, this again allowed people to own a gun without the government trying to stop them via unconstitutional methods. So who to guess? The government doesn't like you owning guns. Gives you power. In conclusion, in the case of Columbia v. Heller, they defined the words and phrases in the Second Amendment, aka that you didn't need to be in a militia in order to, I don't know, be protected under the Second Amendment of owning a gun. These decisions then affected the other two court cases, the McDonald and the New York Rifle Association. Then, funnily enough, with the New York Rifle Association, they defined who could legally own a gun and who couldn't be denied the right to bear arms. So you can't own a gun if you're not mentally sound, all that fun stuff, so they can't just turn you away for no good reason. Or what seemed to you like a no good reason, even though you are on drugs and you're tweaking. That would be funny. That would be really funny, seeing a tweaker try to get a gun. I'd like to see that. Probably has happened. And then in McDonald versus City of Chicago, they defined what types of firearms the average citizen could have. So basically they're saying, yeah, you can own a firearm, but it has to be like historically relevant. Like, for example, Americans used revolvers for self-defense way back in the day. So they're like, any revolver's good, but you can't get a bazooka. You can't get like a sawed-off shotgun turret with like a belt feeder. That's like no-go for something you could have in your home for self-defense. So that's kind of what McDonald case did, building off of the Heller decisions. And throughout the years, the Second Amendment has constantly tried to be stripped from the American people. For example, in 2008, Heller thing. 2010, they tried to take it away again. 2022, which is not. So, how can we in the future prevent the U.S. Constitution, government, not Constitution, the U.S. government from taking away our guns? In the future, I think we should look at how we can make laws that allow American citizens to use new and never before seen guns as self-defense weapons. Because in the future, they're going to develop new sorts of guns, and these new sorts of guns are going to be more powerful, they're going to be better, and leave these guns that we have in our possession today practically obsolete. Think of one example, the musket gun. Like, you can use it for self-defense. It's kind of funny when you see someone pull out a musket gun. There was a video of like some dude in church. He shot like a shooter with a musket gun. That was badass. But you sidetrack. But it's rendering them obsolete. So we need a way for you to be able to use these new and never before seen guns for self-defense, which would be a great idea. For I fear that in time, not only will we develop way better guns that will outclass anything we've ever seen, making, like I said, what we have useless, but the defense we have against our guns, right? So we have bulletproof vests. I feel that we'll be able to develop such like advanced technology in stopping these handguns that if you were to show up with, I don't know, let's say a Glock, and you're trying to defend yourself from a home intruder who has these special newfangled body protection stuff, like, oh, you can't, it does nothing. Your Glock it bounces off me like Nerf bullets because I have my super force field on. You need your actual sniper rifle laser cannon to do anything. So, for that reason, I think we need to integrate something in the system that allows us to do new and more powerful weapons as self-defense. Because then otherwise we're just going to be left with freaking sticks. It's going to be bad. that's kind of my presentation, my bibliography of my sources. Because who would have guessed I need to show you my bibliography. Then we have my script. Great, I know. And the other part of my script. So you can kind of go through all of those. First one, second one. We're good. I made the time requirement. Bye.